Something is being taken away from teenagers right now, and it isn't happening loudly. There are no sirens, no announcements, no single moment where anyone can point and say, "This is when it started." It's happening silently, through policies, platforms, schools, companies, and systems that claim to be protecting young people while steadily narrowing their freedom. One number keeps appearing inside this tightening framework: 67. Not as an age, not as a year, not as a statistic teenagers are ever shown, but as a boundary, a threshold, a control point, a quiet line that decides what is allowed and what is restricted, who passes through and who is slowed down, who gets access and who gets filtered. Teenagers don't talk about 67 directly. They feel it. They feel it when something they post doesn't reach anyone. They feel it when an account feature disappears without warning. They feel it when school systems flag behavior that isn't wrong, but suddenly becomes concerning. They feel it when movement, expression, and curiosity are not punished outright, but gradually limited until they learn to stop trying. This is not discipline. This is restriction. Teenagers today are growing up inside the most controlled environment any generation has ever experienced. Their words are monitored. Their movements are tracked. Their emotions are evaluated. Their behavior is scored. Their curiosity is treated as risk. Their unpredictability is treated as a liability. And the bans are rarely obvious. They don't come in the form of, "You are not allowed." They come as, "This is no longer available. This feature is restricted. This content has limited visibility. This account is under review. This behavior has triggered safeguards." That is how modern banning works. Teenagers are not expelled from systems. They are contained within them. 67 represents that containment. It is the point where tolerance ends and restriction begins. Not enough to justify removal, but enough to justify control. Not enough to warrant punishment, but enough to warrant limitation. It is the number where systems decide. A teenager is no longer safe to be fully free. Schools are often the first place teenagers learn this lesson. Education no longer centers on trust or relationship. It centers on metrics, attendance percentages, performance thresholds, behavioral indicators, risk assessments, intervention triggers. Teenagers are reduced to numbers long before they are treated as people. If behavior dips below a certain range, support quietly disappears. If it rises above another range, surveillance increases. Stay somewhere in the middle, often near a zone symbolized by numbers like 67, and you are allowed to remain, but not to expand. Teenagers quickly learn that being visible is dangerous. Standing out draws attention. Attention leads to monitoring. Monitoring leads to restriction. Restriction leads to disappearance. So they compress themselves. They learn not to ask too many questions, not to show too much emotion, not to express uncertainty too openly, not to push boundaries they cannot see. This is not guidance. It is conditioning. Companies reinforce this control far beyond the classroom. Social media platforms, content platforms, gaming platforms, communication tools, and digital services all operate on moderation systems that are intentionally opaque. Teenagers are never told what line they crossed. They are only shown the result. A video performs far worse than expected. A post doesn't appear in feeds. Messages are delayed. Features vanish. Accounts feel muted. Visibility collapses overnight. There is no explanation, no appeal. No human conversation. Teenagers are left to guess what they did wrong, even when they did nothing wrong at all. That uncertainty is the point. When people don't know the rules, they police themselves. Teenagers begin to censor thoughts before they are expressed. They delete posts before sharing them. They soften opinions. They dull emotions. They retreat into safer versions of themselves. 67 becomes an internalized ceiling. Don't cross it. Don't trigger it. Don't test it. Teenagers today do not ask whether something is true, meaningful, or authentic. They ask whether it will be flagged, whether it will be limited, whether it will cost them access. Freedom is no longer something they exercise. It is something they negotiate. Movement itself has been redefined. Teenagers are told they have freedom, but that freedom exists only within predefined lanes. Physical movement is restricted through curfews, supervision, liability policies, and safety regulations. Digital movement is restricted through filters, moderation, throttling, and automated enforcement. Social movement is restricted through surveillance, documentation, and permanent records of behavior. Everywhere they go, something is watching. And the justification is always the same: safety, protection, responsibility, risk management. Teenagers are told these restrictions exist for their own good. But protection that removes agency does not teach responsibility. It teaches dependence. Teenagers raised under constant restriction do not learn how to manage freedom. They learn how to avoid consequences. They become experts in compliance, not judgment. They do not develop confidence through trial and error. They develop caution through observation. This is where the damage becomes long-term. Teenage years are when people learn who they are by testing limits. When every limit is pre-tested by a system, identity formation becomes distorted. Teenagers learn to be acceptable before they learn to be authentic. They learn how to fit rather than how to grow. 67 is the number where exploration becomes unacceptable, where curiosity becomes a threat, where emotion becomes a risk factor, where deviation becomes something to be corrected before it is even expressed. Previous generations were allowed to fail publicly. Today's teenagers are prevented from failing visibly, which means they are also prevented from learning resilience in real time. Mistakes are not addressed. They are quietly erased, along with the person who made them. That erasure is subtle, but it accumulates. Teenagers stop trusting their instincts. They start trusting systems. They wait for permission to move forward. They internalize the idea that freedom must be earned through compliance. This creates a generation that appears calm, compliant, and adaptable on the surface, but deeply constrained underneath. They are not less emotional. They are more suppressed. They are not less creative. They are more filtered. They are not less curious. They are more cautious. The banning isn't dramatic because dramatic bans invite resistance. Quiet restrictions invite adaptation. There are no protests against invisible limits. There are no marches against algorithms. There are no debates against automated thresholds. Teenagers simply adjust. They learn the cost of being noticed. They learn the safety of staying small. They learn that staying near the middle, near symbolic boundaries like 67, keeps them inside the system. The most dangerous outcome of this environment is not rebellion. It is hesitation. A hesitant generation does not challenge systems. It navigates them. It does not demand freedom. It waits for approval. It does not explore widely. It moves carefully. And systems prefer that. What is being banned right now is not behavior. It is unpredictability. Teenagers are unpredictable by nature. They change rapidly. They experiment. They feel intensely. They question authority. They push limits. That unpredictability is how growth happens. Modern systems cannot tolerate unpredictability. So instead of teaching teenagers how to handle freedom, society has chosen to restrict freedom itself. 67 is one of the quiet symbols of that choice. It represents the acceptable range, the safe zone, the area where teenagers are allowed to exist without causing disruption. Step outside that range, and access is removed. Step too far inside it, and potential is never tested. This is why the trend matters. Because when freedom is restricted during the years, it is meant to be learned. Adulthood begins already compressed, not broken, not rebellious, just limited. Teenagers grow into adults who are comfortable being monitored, comfortable being evaluated, comfortable being restricted as long as the restriction is framed as protection. That is not resilience. That is adaptation to control. The rise of 67 is not an accident. It is not random. It is not harmless. It is a signal that banning has become normalized, restriction has become procedural, and control has become invisible. Teenagers feel it every day, even if they cannot yet articulate it. They feel it when they hesitate to speak, when they hesitate to move, when they hesitate to try, when they hesitate to be fully themselves. And once hesitation replaces exploration, something essential is lost. This is not about nostalgia. It is not about returning to the past. It is about recognizing what is being removed in the present. Teenagers do not need unlimited freedom. They need meaningful freedom. Freedom with guidance. Freedom with accountability. Freedom with consequences that teach rather than erase. What they are receiving instead is restriction without explanation, bans without clarity, and control without consent. 67 is the number where that reality becomes visible. If this analysis feels uncomfortable, that's because it names something that has been happening quietly for a long time. And if you want more hard examinations of cultural shifts like this, welcome to Info Studio. Because trends don't just tell us what people are watching, they tell us what people are losing. Slowly, silently, and without being asked.